everybody. My name is Brad Muniz. I'm a partner at Sobel & Company. I would like to welcome you to Sobel Insights. Sobel Insights is a weekly series where we provide some brief information on various topics. Our goal is to keep these sessions to about 15 minutes. At this time, we do not offer CPE. If you have any ideas for topics or presenters, please feel free to email me. Today's presentation is cannabis regulations. Our speaker is Charles Messina. Charles is a partner at Genova Burns. He's the co-chair of the Cannabis Group. He also taught on the first cannabis course at the New York Law School. So you have a lot of background, a lot of information on this, Charles. And there are a lot of questions that have been coming up because this is hung out and been hung out in front of us, especially in New Jersey.
Sure.
But I hear of so many terms that are thrown around, and listen, I grew up in the 70s and 80s, and I heard different terms then, and I think, oh, that's still applicable. So you hear marijuana, you hear hemp, you hear cannabis. I won't even go into the old pot and all this stuff like that. And now I'm hearing certain things that, like, I forgot what it was called, Delta 8 or something. And
sure.
What are the proper words? I mean, are they all the same? Should it be used interchangeably, or no, not at all?
Great question. And just first, thanks for having me on in our law firm here, Brad. And nice to meet you. So no, you're right. There's actually a ton of names for basically the same plant. You've probably noticed that the word cannabis is being used all the time now instead of pot, weed, and even when referring to marijuana, which as a word, marijuana has its own stigma, right? Considering marijuana was initially criminalized to prevent Mexican immigration stemming from the 1910 Mexican Revolution. So, still unfortunately, after almost a century of prohibition, there remains this lingering stigma over the industry. That stigma not only affects the personal sentiment of people of how they think of the industry, but professionals that operate in it, including myself. So, and then those decisions that municipalities, specifically in New Jersey, are going to make at the local level. So, but I guess to answer your question, the short answer is cannabis, which I'll use interchangeably with marijuana today,
Okay.
or cannabis, that contains the higher levels of THC. It's an acronym for tetrahydrocannabinol. THC is a compound responsible for causing the psychoactive effects of getting high. Hemp only contains trace levels of THC and can be rich in cannabinoid or CBD. So CBD, which I'm sure you've heard of, is mostly all the viewers. It's a compound. It's said of the plant, said to be helpful treating a range of symptoms and ailments. And the passage of the 2018 U.S. Farm Bill at the end of 2018 effectively decriminalized the production or use of hemp and cannabis derivatives like CBD with a lower than 0.3 THC concentration on a dry weight basis. That's in America. There's different THC levels in other countries. But so cannabis, to kind of summarize, or marijuana, still a Schedule I drug at the federal level with no medicinal benefit, but hemp and its derivatives, including CBD, are now removed from the definition of cannabis under the Controlled Substances Act. You mentioned Delta 8. A good question. I mean, you see it sold at bodegas now, gas stations, other places. I was fortunate to go to a Knicks game. I walked into a bodega to get a Gatorade, and you have your Delta 8 flower, Delta 8 gummy right there. And Delta 8 specifically banned in New York right now. So I think I'll explain what it is in a minute, but I think it's a market response in terms of the craze there now in this area from not getting these adult use programs up and running in New Jersey and New York, and not having enough enforcement agents to be policing sales of not only Delta 8, but also underground cannabis sales. You hear about candy companies, which was addressed by the Attorney General recently. But I guess real quickly, Delta 8 is just one of those hundreds of cannabinoids that are found in the plant. It's the fourth most common cannabinoid. It shares properties really similar to Delta 9 THC. That's what you think of as your marijuana, that causes that head high. It's supposed to have a lower psychotropic potency than Delta 9. Proponents will argue that Delta 8, as well as a sister cannabinoid, Delta 10 THC, that, because the Farm Bill, I don't want to go too deep into this, but because it legalized hemp extracts, it is legal if extracted from hemp Delta 8. But the DEA, the bottom line is the DEA disagrees. At the federal level, Delta 8 is a controlled substance, same as cannabis. And anyone selling or marketing Delta 8 or Delta 10, especially in states where it's banned like New York or not specifically permitted, they're doing so at a really high risk.
Okay, I just have to check one thing.
Yeah.
I did say attorney, right? Because you sound like a chemist right now.
No,
I'm sure you've
it's
had to
been
go-
really hard to get a handle. I just joined a Clubhouse app. I'm trying to listen to cultivators out west and talk to people. That's been the homework of mine. I mean, I've been doing the legal work for years on the regulatory level, but it's I'm trying to educate myself as much as possible all the time on
And
the
your
science.
parents probably yelled. You said, "I told you to listen in your chemistry class."
Which I did not.
Right. That's why I became an accountant. I didn't want to do this. Okay. Wow. So there's a lot of different things. And when I hear Delta 8, 9, 10, I actually think like Jolt Cola, but it's not that. All right. So there is a lot of, and cannabis in my mind has always sounded more intellectual than marijuana. Maybe it's because I grew up hearing it that way. Nobody's ever said cannabis. They said marijuana or pot or something like that, weed.
It sounds more professional, right? So I think those in the industry, I mean, you have people that have families that have kids that are master growers at dispensaries that, it's a word right now. It doesn't have that stigma as much associated with it as the words pot, weed, marijuana does. So.
Okay. So I've been to Colorado for business, regular business, and I've been up in Massachusetts where my daughter lives, and I see places up there. Now in New Jersey and New York, is there any way that we can go out, or can we just go out in the street? You're not supposed to go out in the street, but can you just readily smoke or imbibe, I guess even edibles in these states?
Well, can you now? I mean, if there's a legal Delta 8 in the counter, I guess you could buy it. Is it legal? No. I mean, so it's yes and no. If you're a medical patient and you're buying from a medical dispensary, for example, in New Jersey, you're consuming in a place that's allowed in New Jersey, like your home as a medical patient, yes. So it's yes and no. Yes, you can basically consume or smoke cannabis almost anywhere you can smoke a cigarette in New York under New York's new legislation now, but you have to purchase that cannabis from a legal dispensary in New York. In New Jersey, unlike New York, and although cannabis is effectively decriminalized now, you can't smoke or consume outside in public places. And again, you have to purchase and consume that cannabis from a legal dispensary in the same state where you live. So unless you're a medical patient, I guess most of what you're smelling outside is coming from like Humboldt County, California, Massachusetts, or somewhere else. And we're going to get there soon where you're going to be able to walk into a legal dispensary as a non-medical patient a lot sooner in New Jersey than New York.
Yeah, I mean, Governor Murphy, I'm not getting political here, but Governor Murphy said, in his first 100 days, he promised to have adult use legalization, which he may have gotten that done. But as you said, you have to be able to buy it from a legal, dispensary or retailer. But it's past his 100 days. In fact, this November, we're going through the election. I'll have another 100 days. What's going on with it, do you think?
Well, there's a lot of reasons for why this got such a slow start. I mean, just one question before I answer that, I guess, is a lot of folks ask me, when are we actually going to get to the point where as an adult 21 and over, I can walk into a dispensary? Right now, the medical let's start with the lay of the land, I guess. Governor Murphy took office in January 2018. Governor Christie didn't really do much to say not much in terms of getting this program, the medical program, off the ground. So when Murphy took office in January 2018, there were only 6 ATCs awarded vertically integrated licenses. So I'll stop there. An ATC means an alternative treatment center. And a vertically integrated license means that these 6 medical operators in New Jersey at that time, Brad, they could everything from seed to sale. So they could cultivate or grow, they could process and sell at a dispensary to medical patients cannabis. So 6, then there was another round for licensing, for medical licensing in July 2018. There was going to be 2 awarded in each region, 2 in the north, central, south. And those were also 6 additional vertically integrated licenses. There was 148 application teams that applied in July 2018. Another 6 were awarded. That brings the total of New Jersey to 12 ATC licenses. That's where it stops right now. There's no other licenses other than 12. You hear about, and now well over 100,000 medical patients. Now you hear about more dispensaries in 12 opening up. We're close to 20 now. because these 12 ATCs, which are like multi-state operators, they get satellite dispensary locations. But that's where we stand. You hear about during COVID too, lines of medical patients waiting to get their cannabis in supply. There was one more round in July 2019 for another 24 total licenses, 5 cultivation, 15 out of that 24 just dispensing. Think of your retail stores. But that has not even been awarded yet. That round was stayed based on a lawsuit. The long story short is the stay is lifted. Those additional 24 licenses are going to be awarded really soon, I think within the month. And I guess the good news is that we do have a referendum, to your point now, finally passed in New Jersey. It's called the New Jersey Cannabis Regulatory Expungement Aid Modernization Act. It's I'm not going to try to say it again, it's a mouthful. It's really the heart of what will get the adult use mark pumping now. We have now something called the Cannabis Regulatory Commission, or CRC for short. That regulatory body now, Brad, it has the authority to basically control the New Jersey cannabis marketplace, including granting and awarding legal licenses. All the members have been named, so that's good. We have someone really, really competent. I mean, all the members are, but Jeff Brown, who has been running our medical marijuana program through the Department of Health. He's the executive director of this group. We're going to see more regulations the end of August 21st. I think those are the broad strokes of where things stand now, right? We have decriminalization, which is important for social justice. As studies have demonstrated, Black New Jerseyans are at least 3.5 times more likely to be arrested for cannabis possession than white people. So the bill does other things to right past wrongs of cannabis prohibition. But we're getting there.
So I want to just say for your firm too, I've known your firm for many, many years and involved in political stuff in the past too. And your firm has always been very, very connected to the legislature, whichever party was in there. So I know that what you've just cited and gone through, you guys have been involved in this or known about it for a while. So if anybody's looking for a firm that has information and knowledge of the legislature, talk to them. They know, not just on cannabis too.
That's nice of you. Thanks.
Yeah. So you mentioned a few times about the licenses. If cannabis, hemp, Delta 8, 9, 10 wasn't confusing enough, how many licenses are there in New Jersey? Let's talk New Jersey.
Sure. Well, so hemp has its own program. New Jersey was one of the first states that had a comprehensive hemp program. So a lot easier if you want to apply for a hemp cultivation license, for example. I mean, a lot of similar things. You got to get approval from the town, from a zoning perspective, which our land use department handles. But it's an easier process because we have federal legalization of hemp, right? And so easier process to get a hemp license. Cannabis, there's no process for Delta 8 right now, but in terms of cannabis with this adult use scheme, there's going to be 6, we haven't had a round yet of applying for licenses. There's going to be 6 types of licenses up for grabs. Do you want me to go through that real quick?
What type of license? Let's go.
Yeah, I'll go through it briefly. You have a cultivator license that permits growing or cultivation. Class 2 is manufacturing license that permits manufacturing, just what it says, packaging of cannabis. Wholesaler license permits the storage and sale of cannabis strictly for resale. You have class 4 is distributor license that permits the intrastate within the state of New Jersey transportation of cannabis in bulk. You'd be amazed how many people ask me, so I have a friend that operates a dispensary in Massachusetts. I could just transport it here, right? And the answer is no, still. And then retailer, what you think you talked about going to Colorado, your traditional dispensary, that's your retail license. So that's the only license where in New Jersey, we're going to allow something called a consumption area for the general public. If you could purchase your cannabis in a retail, if they get a license for a consumption lounge, you'll have a lounge associated with the dispensary. And then finally, the last license is a delivery license. So you folks could specifically apply to deliver cannabis from a retailer to the general public. And then with all those 6 licenses, just to end shortly, at least I'm describing them, you could also apply as something called a micro business. And so that's great for just preventing the mega businesses from completely dominating the industry in New Jersey. You have at least 25% of the total number of licenses. So out of the 6, the 25% of all the licenses awarded now have to go and are reserved solely for micro businesses.
Okay.
The fees are going to be half less. It's limited, 2,500 square feet for your facility, 1,000 pounds of cannabis each month. But so it's a win for the little guy. And it is possible to not be a big operator and apply.
It's very interesting the way New Jersey, I'm not criticizing New Jersey at all, the way that they've separated it into every little bucket. And you called it manufacturing. It's interesting. We've dealt with the EDA on some of the grow programs, and they were pushing back on us and said, how could it be a food manufacturer? And my partner said to him, well, they take the food and they reprocess it, repackage it, and bake certain things on it. It was food. And they said, that doesn't sound like manufacturing to us. They said, well, what's manufacturing? They said, manufacturing should just be like with nuts and bolts and stuff. And it's like, I said, okay. I didn't realize the cannabis had that designation as manufacturing, because I would have said to them, well, why don't you look at your other regulations? Because there's manufacturing in the description.
Yeah, and New York is even more broken up. I mean, you have 6 different licenses now. New York, there's more than that. So
wow. Okay. I'll let Cuomo do what he wants to do. So my last question is, what are the biggest challenges that you feel for anybody that wants to get into this business?
I mean, I went on a little bit of a tangent in the beginning about the stigma, but I think you still have that strong stench of the stigma surrounding the industry. So that's one. I think the main thing's probably obvious though, Brad. You're dealing with a federally illegal substance, right? So there's always going to be some level of risk tolerance if you want to be a cannabis business operator, and barriers to entry that really don't exist in other industries. You have residency requirements. You need experience, and a third of the points scored, because this is on a scoring scale, at least in the last 2 medical rounds, third of the points basically went to how much experience do you have doing what you're applying for. Money, you need capital, local relationships, and then you got to run the business. And there's a lot of unique difficulties after the gargantuan effort to get the license. It's like, you're a CPA. Does your accountant or finance team know how to best advise you around the impact of 280E? As you know, 280E of the tax code, it prohibits cannabis businesses from taking deductions for ordinary business expenses. So that's just figuring out, if you have a dispensary, where am I going to put my product? Can I avoid the total impact of that? That's a thing. Do you have appropriate insurance? Assuming not, because it's so hard to get appropriately insured and you're a big enough operation, should we be considering a self-insured type of model, such as a captive? So, the federal legalization is a big, creates a lot of issues.
Yeah, the banking, I think, is one of the biggest issues that we're dealing with. Any federal bank they're hesitant on it, and that's a big problem, because now how are you going to transact business with your landlord, your utility companies? If you're having restrictions on attaining proper bank accounts, that might push people to cyber, which that's cyber currency is another topic we presented on. So I would hope that the federal government, you could say with the change in January, I would hope that they would start focusing on this and start helping some of these businesses, especially the micro businesses. The big ones may have figured out how to address this, but these micro businesses in New Jersey, they're going to have a tough time, overcoming some of these obstacles.
Yeah, I think it's going to even be tougher with federal. It sounds an opposite, right? But I think with federal legalization, they're going to have a tougher time. They're going to be competing with big tobacco, big alcohol, not as much risk adverse going into the game. We're going to have a federal tax that's going to be slapped on top of whatever tax each state is set up. So there's going to be other unique challenges for your small businesses, even with federal legalization. But it's like every day. I was on vacation in Maine last week. We chatted about that for a couple of minutes, but July 14th, I think it was, there's a new act out now. Chuck Schumer, Ron Wyden, Booker unveiled the Cannabis Administration Opportunity Act. It's very similar. It bears similarities to the MORE Act we introduced this year, but it's doing what you said. It would remove cannabis as a Schedule I drug and do a number of other things, but there's still going to be problems and challenges for small businesses, even with federal legalization.
Well, super. Well, I appreciate all the information. I hope the viewers gained a lot of information from this. I'm sure they did, if not legal. and regulation than chemistry they did. As I said before, if you have any questions relating to many legal matters, legislative matters, talk with Charles and his associates or his other partners over at Genova Burns. We've worked them for a long time. And I want to thank you very much for speaking with us today.
Thank you, Brad. That's great.
Okay, let me.